Hello, this is David Benign from Excel Consulting. In this video, I'm going to show you how to analyze survey data using Power Query in Excel. So let's get some survey data to start. So here I am in Microsoft Forms, but the same kind of methodology also works with Google Forms. So if I open in Excel from this data and I go to this question, which of these classic PowerPoint functions do you use? And here, because it's multi-select, they're all separated with a semicolon. It makes it hard for me to analyze. So let me enable editing. So I'm going to insert a pivot table. This is not a session on pivot tables. If you want to learn those, I have other videos. But I'm going to say which of these classic PowerPoint functions do you use? And I just want to know how many people have ticked charts, how many people have ticked animations. Unfortunately, because they are multi-select, it doesn't give me the neat answers like Microsoft Forms does here. So we need to manipulate the data, and the best way to do that is with Power Query. So I'm going to do a couple of things here. One thing that I tend to do in these situations is I take all the header columns, like this, however many there are, I copy them, go to a new sheet, and then I go to paste and paste special, and I'm going to choose values and transpose. And that's going to put them like this in its own column. So this is the column name. This serves a few purposes we'll see. Then I'm going to have the short name, and then I'm going to add some analysis. And for this, you always want to turn your long question names into something you want to see when you analyze. Okay, so now I've finished editing this, how I want to analyze it. I'm going to select this data. I'm going to go to data and get data from a table or range, and that loads up Power Query. Now it asks me to make it into a table, so I just press OK there. And it loads up the Power Query editor. I don't need to do anything yet, so I'm going to close and load that. I'm going to go back to this data, which is my main survey data, and I'm going to go data again and from table or range. So what we end up with is we've got two queries. So these two, table 1, table 2, I'm going to call this main data, and I'm going to call this questions. Now I'm going to replace the names of these with these. So the way to do that is I see that my headers are on the top row, which is kind of what they should be, but I'm going to bring them down by choosing, instead of use first row as headers, the other way around, use headers as first row. Demotes them, and then I can go to transport and transpose the data. That flips it, and now all of my headers are in column number 1. And these, because I did a copy and paste, will exactly match the ones in here. So I'm going to go into this one, and I'm going to click on the Home tab, Merge Queries. And I'm going to convert this with my questions table and match them up. As you can see, it's matched 15 of 15 rows, so I don't need to select the join kind or fuzzy matching, and that's because I copy and pasted it, so that's expected. It brings the questions there, and then I can just tick on short name. So this is now the name of my headers. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move this to the beginning. So right click on it and choose move to beginning. I don't need this one, but I'm going to get rid of that in a second. Instead, I'm going to go back to transform and transpose. This is one of those Power Query recipes where you've got to do a few steps that may not make sense on their own, but when you eventually put them together, you get to your outcome. So what I'm going to do is I've got my columns here. Next, I'm going to go to use first row as headers. And then I can filter out what I don't need. So in this case, email, I can untick email because that's just a long header name. You can see this is very, very long in these cases. Press OK, and suddenly I have my short header names. Ta-da! There we go. So that is what we were aiming for there. Let's go through some other steps. So I'm going to select all the columns, Control A, go to Transform and Detect Data Type. The ones that have selected a date-time is rarely what you want. I'm going to Control click both, go to Transform and change it to just a date and replace current. Do any of the others need changing? I think they're okay. Most of them are just text. The hours one is numbers, which is fine. And then I'm going to go to choose columns in the home tab. And let's keep a minimal number for this demo. So I'll choose start time, classic and modern features used, and I'll choose difficulty hours as well. So I'm going to press OK. And then I have all of these columns selected. And I'm going to do certain things to these. So this, for good practice, this is going to be my staging query. By staging means it's not going to load because this is just going to branch off into my other queries that I do. So I'm going to right click this and I'm going to choose reference. And this is going to be single select. So here, I'm only going to keep the options that are single select, which is start time, hours, difficulty, remove other columns. I don't want to keep the others. By the way, it's best practice to remove other columns rather than remove columns, so you get this cog that's editable later on. Then I'm going to go back to the main data, right click and reference again. And this time, I'm just going to keep my start time and my classic features used. I'm going to right click that and choose remove other columns. And this is going to be classic features. And the next thing that I want to do in this one is I want to convert these from all of them in one cell into multiple rows of data. So what that will effectively mean is that I will get more rows in my data and I will go all the way further down there. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to click on this and then choose split column by delimiter, choose a semicolon in the custom tab. At each occurrence, go to advanced options and split into rows like that. Then I get some null values. So I'm going to just click on the filter and choose remove empty. And now I have all of these and I can get to eventually, through a pivot table, I'll be able to get through what we saw over here, which is this alignment, this layout here. Now I'm going to show you how it could work in other ways. So in main data, I'm going to reference, and I'm going to keep start time and modern features used. I'm going to right click that and choose remove other columns. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to split this in a different way because I know that this other way is going to be how other surveys give their results. So Microsoft Forms does it with these semicolons. Other ones will give it to you when it's split with a semicolon in columns like this. So they might have number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or another version that they might have is that this will say morph, yes, no. This will say map charts, yes, no. This will say icons and SVG, yes, no. All features that I absolutely love in the new PowerPoint, and I bang on about them in some of my other videos, so please check those out if you're into PowerPoint. But without sidetracking here, how are we going to go from this to a similar thing as last time when people have selected, as it is, up to 9 different options? So what I can do is I can select all of these features and I can go to transform and unpivot only selected columns. That's better than unpivot columns here. There we go. And now I have my start time and my value. I don't need this attribute. I don't care if it's the first, the second, or the third one they picked. I just want to know which one did they pick. So I'm going to click on this one, and again, I'm going to go to remove other columns. And here, like before, I'm going to remove empty. So I get to the same answer regardless of how I started. I'm going to call this modern features, like that. And finally, I'm going to try and find a way to compare these results to each other. So I had thought that maybe the start time and the start date would give me a unique identifier, but it hasn't done that. But because I started with a staging query, I can now make changes to this that will flow through to all of the other charts. So if I change this data, let's go back to my change type here. And remember, what's great about this one, what's great about Power Query is that if you go back in time, I call this a time machine here, the applied steps, then everything follows through. So if I don't change this into time and into date and keep the date time, I'm hoping to have unique identifiers here. So I'm going to replace current rather than add a new step. And then I can go back here, and these are now followed through. So that's followed through into all of these only because I have this as a staging query that is not loading. So I'm going to actually rename that to staging main data. I often prefix it with this hashtag. So now I've got all of these three tables, and let's just test whether they have unique identifiers. So single select, if I click on here, I want to test whether there's any duplicates. I can go to keep rows and choose keep duplicates. This table is empty. That means I have no duplicates, which is perfect. So that was just a test. I'm going to go back here and exit out of that mode. And now I have these three tables that are loading. I'm going to click close and load. I'm going to click close and load. Because of my features, it's loading a connection only. If you have not set that feature, then you will get them all loading to the worksheet. But I'm going to just right click, load to table in a new worksheet, single select, right click, load to table in a new worksheet, and right click, load to table in a new worksheet. Right, so now I've got three tables, and each of those is able to now answer a certain question for me. So if I want to know, well, how many people chose the eyedropper, I can click on this table, go to Insert Pivot Table in an existing worksheet. Let's put it here. And let's say that I want to see the value there and the value there. So how many people have chosen each of these? This is what it's showing me. And if I compare this by making it into a column chart, let me compare this with what I've got for forms. So design ideas is 18. Let me go back here. Design ideas is 18. So there you go. Now I've got the same data that I'm able to chart. But it's more powerful because it's in Excel, so I can apply filters. For example, here, I could say that I want to see this data by start time. So I'm going to just drag that into columns, and I can see how they responded by month and how that happened there. So I can apply these filters, which I can't do using the other test. Now let's go for another side with a single select, and then we'll see why we had to separate them out in tables. So right now I'm going to single select, and I'm going to say, well, how did we do for this? Notice this table ends at row 30, whereas the other table ended at row 163. And our starting data ended at row 30. So the single select has the same number of rows because nothing is unpivoted, nothing changes. So if I want to analyze these things, I can insert a pivot table in an existing worksheet here. And I'm going to say, well, I want to know the average number of hours and assess that by difficulty, like that. So how many hours do they spend on PowerPoint? I can right-click, choose Summarize Values by Average, like that. And I get the number of hours there. I can also see, for example, data of how many responses there were by month, like I could before. Now, why did I need the 3 tables? So let's go back to our query and see what happens if we didn't do that. So I'm going to go back in time in this query, and I'm not going to remove the columns for hours. So I removed hours from here, but then I have another removed other columns. So I'm going to go here and keep hours, press OK, close and load. And then it's showing as a new column in my worksheet as expected. So we're going to look at another pivot table here. So I'm going to insert another pivot table in an existing worksheet right over here. And I'm going to refresh the pivot table. Right click and refresh. And now I get the hours column. In the new one, I'm going to look at the sum of the hours by months, like that. And now I get 413 hours to give me the sum. If I change this to be an average, and we can see that these average hours are completely different. And certainly if I change this to a sum, this is 98. But my other one, if I change to a sum, is 413. Why? Because the rows are double counted. So that's why it's really, really important to not load this data into your lower queries. And that's why you need one table for each multi-select option separately to one table for all the other single select options. And that's the best way to analyze your data using Power Query and pivot tables here. You could, if you wanted to go further, and I often recommend this, you could create table relationships. And if you want to learn more about table relationships, then I have another video that I'll link to at the end of this one. But I'm going to stop this video here for now, because that is how you can clean up data in surveys using Power Query. If you like this video, please click the like button and subscribe to my channel for more great content on Excel, PowerPoint, Power BI coming at you every week. Thanks for watching.